Hello, welcome to ControllerCast. On this podcast, I talk with peers about all things everything video games. Feel free to respond and chat with me on our social media, and also check out my YouTube channel TP Game for other gaming content in the background. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Hey, this is the ControllerCast. This is episode number 4. This is a special spooky episode. So I hope you all enjoy. This is us in the booth recording. Today I have Tony with me. He was on the last episode when we talked about esports and competitive gaming, and I'm also having Cassie call over the internet. She's been on 2 episodes already, so welcome back, Cassie.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Of course, it's always happy to have you on. So in this podcast, we talk about all things video games, and in this episode, I'm joined by these two, and you can find Tony at the Yum channel on YouTube, and you can find me at TP Game on YouTube and Twitch. So go and check those out. Super cool stuff. And today we are going to be going over horror games, scary games, and how they really create atmosphere, and how they've changed the gaming industry, or not really changed, but been a significant asset to the gaming industry as a whole. All right, so how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good, Drew.
Pretty good. I'm glad to have you guys on and doing this. I hope everyone watching out there enjoyed that little behind the scenes pictures or video of us in the booth. So, I thought that'd be cool to see. And so yeah, the topic today is horror games. And I love playing horror games. I know all 3 of us kind of have different experiences with horror games. Some of them the same, but some of them are also different. So I think we all have our own stories to share. But I want to say I think the first scary game I ever played, which technically was like a kind of like a troll scary game, and that was called Scary Maze Game. Do you guys remember that?
Was it the 2D one where you look down at the map and at the end of the 3rd level you get like a jump scare?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you remember that, Cassie?
No, I don't. I didn't really start actually playing games until maybe high school, and I'm pretty sure that your gaming experience predates that. So.
Okay. It was when I was really young, and I think my friends pranked me by making me play it. So it's this game where you move a square through a maze, and it gets kind of difficult at some points because you can't touch the sides of the maze, or else you have to start over. But you use your mouse. Your mouse is the square, and you move it through the maze. And then in the middle of the 3rd level, there's this part at the really end that's really skinny, where the hallway is basically the size of your cursor. So you have to very carefully move it to get to the end without touching the sides. But that's how it does it. Is it waits until you're it goes to that point and where you're really focused on not touching the sides, and then when you get about halfway through to it, it triggers a point, and a jump scare of this horrific looking face just appears on the screen and goes and screams at you, and that's the end of the game. So yeah, that goes way back. I don't even know when that was made.
I remember I played it back in middle school. So that was sometime after 2009.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It might have been before then, though.
It could have been maybe beforehand. But yeah, that was my first experience. What was your first horror game you played? Was it?
I don't know.
I'm not even sure that's considered a horror game, but that's
it's a troll game. It was spooky, definitely. I don't know. I wasn't. I didn't play a lot of horror games when I was growing up. I played FPSs and stuff, and I played definitely a lot of casual games like Viva Pinata, if anyone remembers that game, and all the Wii Sports games. I don't know when my first horror game was. I think Fnaf was definitely probably one of the starting ones for me, but I didn't really get that involved in it.
What was the first horror game you played, Cassie?
Yeah, like to me, like horror isn't really my genre. Like when I did play games, it was more like farming simulators. But I do remember in high school, one of my friends had Fnaf on her tablet, and she let everyone like give it a try. And I do think I tried like maybe like one day. I can't remember if I finished it, but I was definitely scared. I was like, this is scary. I don't like the you have to check everything, you gotta look around, and you gotta listen to all of these cues. And I mean, it was lunchtime in high school, so it's not exactly like gaming environment.
Right.
But I remember thinking that the game was pretty scary.
All right. So I guess we all kind of had mentioned Five Nights at Freddy's. If anyone's curious what FNAF means, Five Nights at Freddy's by Scott Cawthon. So I guess we'll delve into that topic because that was something I wanted to hit because that was a key like turning point in the horror game genre. I guess before or not too long before, the big thing was Slender Man. That was big. We'll go back and we'll talk about that soon. We'll take a step back and talk about that soon. But since we were talking about Five Nights at Freddy's, let's get into that because that one sticks out to me a lot because it was revolutionary in the way that like it's very different from a lot of horror games, like, you know, because it is a survival horror game, but it's different in the sense it's different from like, let's say like Resident Evil or Soma. There are suspenseful scary moments and there are jump scares and there are monsters you have to kill and to advance the story. But like for Five Nights at Freddy's, all the story happens in the background, and there are a bunch of little clues here and there, like in game and whether it's like in game, out of game, on Scott's website, whatever it is, hinting to the next game, and parts of the story come together with each additional game. But the really thing that stood out to me was that the restriction of control that you have in the game, because normally, I'll make another parallel to Resident Evil. In Resident Evil, you're going around and, you get weapons to kill, the monsters with. In Five Nights at Freddy's, you don't have any defense. You don't have
any tools.
You don't have anything, and you also can't move.
Yeah, you can't move. Like a lot of horror games, I'm just going to interject, because like Resident Evil, Phasmophobia.
Right.
I mean, you could even include the Amnesia games. I know for people who are really paying attention to Amnesia and Soma, those were actually made by the same studio or the same publisher. I'm not sure which, but in those games, even though some of those games have varying levels of defending yourself, like Resident Evil literally gives you a minigun to defend yourself, whereas Amnesia, you're kind of just left to your wits. But in all of those, you're in control of yourself and what you do. You're an autonomous body in a very dangerous place, and so you can move, you can go places, you can influence the environment around you. And Five Nights at Freddy's really limits that, but still brings as much of a punch of horror element to it.
And that makes it scarier because you have to let the threats come to you, instead of facing them.
You can't move away from them.
You have limited power, so you can't just keep your defenses down the whole time. You have to strategize, and
you have to manage resources.
Actively be thinking, and actively be keeping track of things. And as the games, more games came out, that grew even more apparent because there was more stuff you had to have going on in the background when you're playing the game. Like, the second game introduced the music box. The music box mechanic. That's a whole other thing you have to be keeping track of in your mind. All the lore behind it, I'm not even going to get started on the lore because it goes really, really deep. I'm at this point, I was like up to par with the lore, and I knew everything up until like a certain game that came out, but then at this point I'm kind of lost because I just haven't been paying as much attention. But there's a lot of things that go on in the background, like I said, with in-game clues. Sometimes some of the games had like little like mini games that would happen after you completed a level, or if you died, you would like get thrown into like a little like what was it, like a Atari style like little like mini game thing, which were also creepy, by the way. And it's just the story, the idea of the lost children, the murdered children's souls inside the animatronics are what are kind of haunting them. And there's a lot more to it than just that. But that's a big thing. Is that, and also a lack of what makes it also really scary is a lack of information. They don't really tell you much to help you. I mean, they have the guy on the phone that talks to you, but
he quite literally describes the mechanics of different things. He doesn't even really talk about the difference between all of them and related. He's like, this is how you close a door and this is your power. Anyway, figure out why you need power and why you need doors.
Yeah, exactly. That they're like, okay, well, this could happen if you mess up, and good luck, good night. And it's like, yeah, it's pretty scary. And a lot of it is just like, even just the suspense it builds up, like just the waiting, for something to come. And I guess also I'll go into this next I guess part of it, which is sound. I think for me, it's sound that does it more for me in a horror game than visual. I think I just get scared more by sound. Like if I played a game that had no visuals but just sound effects, I think that would scare me more than watching a silent.
No, sound, I mean, there's been dozens of studies that show that the sound really affect gaming. And not just in the horror sense, but I think certain genres of gaming are definitely affected more by sound. And I think the horror genre is actually largely dependent on sound. Because if you think about Fnaf or Amnesia, I mean, the visuals of the game are pretty repetitive. For Fnaf 1, you're literally in the same office. You have 9 different cameras, but you're all pretty much a fixed image.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all your visuals you're going to get. In Amnesia, the textures are I'm talking about sort of I don't remember which Amnesia game I'm talking about because I've seen so many. But the one with the hallways with the stone flooring and the wooden sides, that's a pretty just common texture that you're just going to see over and over again. The props in the rooms are, for the most part, with some exceptions, are for the most part the same props. That's not a criticism of the game anyway. They don't need to be different.
Yeah.
And if you were just looking at that, the game doesn't leverage it. In fact, most of the time when the enemy's on the screen, it's for a very short period of time, which means the game can't lend its visual aid to really bring about atmosphere, because atmosphere is more about everything around you at all times than something direct. For instance, scary atmosphere does not mean something scary is either in front of you or even around. But something in the atmosphere, something in the environment seems wrong. And the problem is visual aids are much too direct. So unless you want the player to immediately be under threat, it's very hard to, it's not impossible. It's done. And it's utilized actually quite well in both those games still. But you can't be heavy-handed with visual horror atmosphere building. You really can't be. You can really just kind of screw the pooch on that one. Whereas sound, I feel like, I mean, you still got to be subtle with it, but you actually be surprised how unsubtle a lot of, if you really were to take a silent room and then listen to the audio of any horror game, even the ambient audio, you'd be like, there's actually a lot of sound going on. They can also add that on top of a visual when they actually want danger to strike. So, for instance,
a stinger.
In Fnaf, in Fnaf, I'll use Fnaf since that's sort of the one we're talking about. I could talk about a different game, but we'll use Fnaf. Is that the atmosphere? I mean, occasionally you see an animatronic in a room, but they're not moving. It's a little spooky. That is definitely building the atmosphere, just seeing them not on stage and that somehow they moved to a different camera. That's spooky on its own, but that's it. That is all the visual aid you get. But it's the buzzing of when you switch to a camera, and then the hum, and then the quiet footsteps in the hallway when you're out, and then you don't hear footsteps, but you hear them, all that stuff. And then when you get jump scared, audio and visual can come together immediately to present that danger. They throw an animatronic at your face as well as playing a really loud sound, which doesn't normally occur in the rest of the game. And so audio is probably the most important part, because you can be pretty heavy in its use in subtle, even though they may seem subtle, pretty heavy in its use actually for atmosphere building, and then pretty heavy in its use for the actual danger strike or scare or whatever you're trying to set up, whatever the climax of that is.
Yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's definitely uses sound to its advantage, amazingly. And also, in some of the games, it's very apparent that you need to use the sound to win and to succeed in the game. Like you need to pay attention to those audio cues. And I don't know, I guess I'll use, for example,
well, you can talk about Fnaf. Is that Fnaf makes it seem like it's a visual game. I mean, hell, the device they give you to keep track of the animatronics is a security camera, not a baby monitor, not a smelloscope that can smell the animatronics coming. They give you a camera, which is visual. The thing is, you really are using sound most of the time. They actually, in a very spooky way, mislead you, and that was on purpose to be like, oh yeah, you have a camera to make sure where they're coming from. that's not what's going to help you.
Yeah.
You think it is, but it's not.
You know, the one camera that's out,
You have to use audio for it.
it's audio because you can hear it. You can hear it, and even when you're not in the camera, you can hear it. It's kind of in
You
the
can hear in the
distance.
hallways. Well, I know I can't remember which FNAF, but the one that was in the bedroom, that one I think is entirely audio dependent.
Oh, so yeah, so Five Nights at Freddy's 4, where they brought in the nightmare animatronics, which made them look much more vicious,
Much
and
more
terrifying. You know, sound in FNAF 4. It's imperative that, like, you know, and just, you know, speaking of atmosphere, the atmosphere in that game, you know, like, I just remember, like, one of the first times I played that game, as soon as I started, I was like, this is a different game. Because I'm just like, first of all, you have a lack of, you know, visual because you have a flashlight and you're in a bedroom. It's not, there aren't overhead lights or anything. And
you can't really look around. You have the limited looking around space that they give you. It's not, this is where we're talking about restriction is, the game doesn't force you to look in one place. It's not like the camera's fixed. It does move a little bit, but it's restricted. It's not like it's not like any game where like you can just freely rotate your head around. Like
also you can look behind you.
You can look behind you. So but notice that's a mechanic. They added the mechanic of you looking behind you.
Yeah.
You can't just simply look around and then get behind you. And that's really interesting. Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, it's all good. And then two, the sound. Well, for one, of course, you have to, there's, as soon as the night starts, there's like this very low, like droning ambience that's very, very creepy. And it's, you know, it's very subtle, but it's loud enough that it's like very, like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's very dreadful.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you have to listen for breathing when you go to the doors, because when you open the door, it's pitch black. And you know, when you open the door, it's pitch black, and you have to listen for this very, very quiet breathing, to know if it's safe to turn on your light or not. You know, and if it, you know, I've had several times where I've missed it. I thought I was hearing breathing, and I wasn't. And turn that light on, and they're right there, and it's like that's that creep factor. You know, that's that suspense factor that really comes in there. That you have to be really keen on your listening, and like you so much attention to detail.
Well, it's really interesting. I think a really good way to phrase it is like, remember how I brought up restricted movement and restricted looking? Like you can't just like open the door a little bit. It opens it to a certain amount that it's programmed to. All your movements and your ability to look are limited. Your view, your world interpreted through movement and sight are restricted, and whatever liberties you have in movement. So, like, you know, when you're on the bed, it's not like you're just looking forward. You can look to the left a little bit and look to the right a little bit, and then use the mechanic to look behind you. But your world through sight and movement are severely restricted, and whatever liberties you have with them are given to you. You don't just get to move your head in whatever degree you want. So the restriction on movement and sight is limited, but the world building for sound is full.
Right.
They don't have like certain, like, oh, you can only hear out of your right ear at this point. Like, no, the world is fully audio. Imagine sitting in your room. Imagine you're in a dorm, so that there's the possibility for things going on in the room next to you, things going on to the left, up, down. There's construction outside. There's a hallway, like different parts of your world around you. Just close your eyes. Different parts of the world around you can make noise, and you only have 2 ears, so it's sometimes hard to sort of locate where that's coming from depending on which way you're facing, and that's good for this example, but that's how you interpret your world. Close your eyes, you have 2 ears, and you have so many different directions you can hear from. Now, open your eyes and pretend you can't hear, and you can only look straight. Very limited. FNAF does this amazing thing where the world is fully built in sound. Everything in the sound-related part of the world is fully built. Everything. You have every direction, every whatever, that world's fully built. Your ability to interpret the world through sight is very limited. Your ability to interpret the world through sound is pretty much unlimited.
So Cassie, since you have also played, I can't remember, you've played the first 2, right?
Is that what? I know we played through the first one.
You played the first one. I think we played up to like night 3 or 4. I know you tried the second one as well.
Yeah, I think so. I do remember the music box.
Yeah, so I guess, and we wore headphones, so you were able to experience the sound. You So like, what was your experience with? I guess just pick one of the games and just like, what was your experience with the sound and the atmosphere?
I guess just the first one. I don't know, like Tony was saying, sound's a huge contributor to games. Like I know Minecraft isn't a horror game, but like sound in Minecraft can definitely scare me. So like sound plays a very big role in FNAF. Like if it was a silent game, I don't think I would be scared. Maybe at all. Maybe the jump scares would scare me a little bit, but there definitely wouldn't be that sense of like suspense or like anticipation, knowing that something is about to come out and get me. Um, Especially at the end, like if you run out of battery and then Freddy comes in and they have like the da 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 like music as he comes in, like that last little like bit of suspense before you know you're about to die. That's scary as well. The atmosphere itself is, I mean, it's an office, so it's not the most scary thing. It's not like when we're playing white noise and it's like a really like scary scenery, like you can see like the dead bodies hanging around on the carousel for whatever reason. So it's an office, but it really is like that, the sound and like the knowing that something is going to come get you and you can't do anything about it, like you guys are talking about. It really makes it a scary game, just like being unable to move and hearing things coming closer to you and having very little that you can do to protect yourself. Makes it very scary.
That's the whole thing. Is that again that big word for FNAF: restriction, restricted resources, restricted vision, restricted movement, and very little information is given. And so I guess let's take a step back for a second, because I first got into like horror games when I was watching. I think when I watched like a couple of YouTubers, and then myself play like Slender Man, Slender the 8 Pages, or whatever the original
one was.
And then there were like thousands of like like
remasters, remakes, spin-off
games. Yeah, I know there's The Arrival that was on Steam.
Is that still on Steam?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's not on, it hasn't been updated.
I played it back in like 2014, 15-ish. I never understood the mechanics of the game. Could you explain those to me?
Yeah. So I guess so.
That's why I kept dying in it.
When you're in the forest, you have to collect 8 pages, and it's and it's in a set map. The map does never change. That map never changes. The page locations change each time. Like, you need to get through it, and you want to get through it as quick as you can because your flashlight has a battery.
Yeah, I noticed that. It took me a while to realize that. By the way, that's how well that was built. I didn't even realize my battery was dying.
Yeah. Well, eventually it'll completely run out. It'll be pitch black.
So what I noticed, it doesn't give you a battery indicator, which is fine. No. But what really tripped me up was they didn't tell you your battery's going to die.
That's scary.
That was scary. No, I agree. That's not bad game design. It was scary because I was walking around and I remember thinking, but it was a while. Like whenever this effect started happening, I started noticing it way after this effect started happening. But I was like, I feel like I can see less.
Yeah, exactly.
And then eventually got to the point where I can only see like 3 trees in front of me, and I was like, was I able to see further before? Like I was like,
yeah, you question it.
I was questioning it. It led to me questioning it, and I don't mean in a way where it's like, oh, this is bad game design. It's making me question. Like, no, that was really good that they didn't tell me that my battery dies, and 2, give me a battery indicator.
Yeah, and whether they didn't put in an indicator on purpose or whether they just didn't
know how to,
didn't have the resources or to, because I know in Arrival they had a battery indicator. I'm pretty sure. I think on easy mode your battery couldn't even run out.
Anyway, you were saying something. Collect 8 pages.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So
is that that's an old game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still scary, and they don't have like all these crazy like visual effects,
yeah,
or even really sound effects. A lot of them are very basic, like simple background ambience. That's all it is, and then maybe like the sound of like trees like moving in the wind, and then like the jump scare sound. That's about it. That really shows that you don't need these big budget games to make it scary.
No, you don't.
You don't. And so when you pick up a page, Slenderman gets more aggressive. So he'll start teleporting around more. He'll I think you can look at him for less or something like that. The more you look at him, the more your screen starts growing static, and if you look at him for too long, you automatically die. And also, if you get too close to him, you automatically die because he catches you. It's like this very distant booming sound, and then and it's very rhythmic. But it's still scary because, like, there's no sound before you pick up your first page. So when you're playing it,
Does that booming start after your first page?
Yeah. So
And then does it keep going?
Yeah. When you pick up your first page, it continuously goes. But at first, you're like, what is that? Is something coming?
Yeah, you're like, is that like a warning sign? And it's like, no.
And then
just
they
the
layer,
ambience
and
increasing.
they layer other things on top of it after you get more pages. And so I guess the mechanics you were asking me about, what kind of, just how he works, how the Slenderman works.
Well, I think you just explained it. Whoops, sorry. I think you just explained it.
Because the thing about him is that it's kind of almost like each like Slenderman game or remake game kind of gives him slightly different like kind of AI. Like I know a lot of them. It's like a weeping angel thing.
Yeah,
we're
I've played a few Team Fortress 2 custom maps where there's an enemy. It's all the players versus either an AI enemy or and they change the HUD. There's a lot of extra mods that go into these servers that run this because it's definitely not base TF2. And a lot of them use these creepy elements where you have to get through a map with something either chasing you or appearing, and oftentimes you'll see a Weeping Angel and a Slenderman version on the same server. They just alternate the boss type because they function so similarly.
That's what I like about it, is that there are games that have done stuff like that where like you can't look at an enemy or you have to look at an enemy. But Slenderman, like the Slenderman kind of does both, because it kind of, you have to be very selective about it, because if you look at him for too long, you'll start losing your sanity, and then you'll die if you look at him for too long, and you won't be able to see. But you also have to keep track of where he is so that he doesn't move, because he can't move if you're looking right at him.
That was something I've definitely found also confusing, and that was a good thing. Added to the atmosphere was the disorientation. I was like, you can't look at him because your screen gets all fuzzy.
Yeah.
And then you die if you look too long. But then I was like, but if I don't look at him, does he just come and kill me? Does he teleport closer? And then at that point, that means I'm going to walk into him if I'm not staring at him. Like, you can't, if he's in front of you, he just teleports in front of you. You can't just turn around and walk backwards. I don't know. He might not go away by the time if he's like 50 feet in front of you, he may not teleport away by the time it happens.
Yeah.
Or he could teleport closer. Like, you're right. Slenderman actually was this really nice combination, because with Weeping Angels, you have to stare at them. Your disadvantage was that in games that, employ Weeping Angels is that they add a blinking mechanic, because you will eventually blink.
Oh.
So in Team Fortress 2, they added a thing where you blink. Now, you needed multiple people looking at him, but still, you can get disoriented and mess that up, and everyone blinks at the same time or something. But what I liked about Slenderman was it was very... He incorporated both ends of that. Like, he's not going to auto-kill you if you don't look at him. But,
No.
But now you're not moving, because if you keep moving, he might still be there. He can kill you both by looking at him and touching him, and if he's in your way... Like, the way he spawns, the way he despawns, the way he goes away, the way, like, just how he works was actually a very intelligent design.
Yeah, Cassie, you've played Slenderman before, right?
I don't know if I have. I think I've just kind of watched you. But, like, as you're talking about Slenderman, I mean, I think White Noise is based off of Slenderman.
Yeah.
It seems more interesting.
So, well, you've definitely seen it then. You've definitely seen Slenderman.
Yeah.
And I guess White Noise kind of does. White Noise isn't a very popular horror game, but it kind of is like a multiplayer Slenderman kind of deal. Although they take it further.
Right.
I think that's going to take us to the question of the day. And I think the question of the day today is, for each of you, suggest a good horror game for people listening to play. Like, what, or even for people who who aren't sure if they want to play a horror game, but give this a try. Like, something like that.
So I'm a really big coward when it comes to games like this, and I didn't really realize it until like one summer before college. But the game I would suggest, which is important for me, I realized, is Soma. Is the reason why I kept. So Soma was a game that's developed by the same people who make Amnesia, I'm pretty sure, and Soma has a storyline that I told myself that summer that I wanted to play a scary game, and I didn't realize how big of a task that was, because in a game, when you get scared, like when the atmosphere finally catches up to you, like when you're genuinely scared, and Soma has this thing called easy mode and real mode, or I don't remember what it was called, or safe mode and like regular mode. And in safe mode, you can't die. In fact, you can't even really get injured. In fact, a lot of stuff doesn't really harm you. And in regular mode, you can die. Granted, the game has very generous save points. Like when you die, it's not like, oh, you have to go back to it. Like, it doesn't do that. The game doesn't punish you for dying.
Yeah, okay.
Your punishment for dying is that it was horrific dying. That dying was scary. And by horrific, I don't mean like Doom with his gore everywhere. I mean like just the event itself was so scary. And I was like, well, I'll play it in safe mode first, and then I'll go back around and play it in regular mode. And then I was like, no, Tony, you're going to play it on regular mode, which is the hard mode, first. You're going to experience the game in kind of its original habitat. What I don't like about Soma is that they say that safe is like a good way to just kind of experience the game. I actually really disagree. I think the game should be experienced on danger mode, because I don't know when the next thing's going to kill me. There are parts of the game where it's scripted, where it looks like something's going to kill you, but then you don't. But you don't know that your first playthrough through. And that's the thing, is when you can die, like, you're like, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. You can get injured once. Like, when enemies attack, like, you can get injured once and then you're on low health. Whereas you can then die eventually. And the thing is, I didn't know when those moments were coming, and it made me interpret danger differently. And the point I originally want to make about why Soma is a game that everyone should play is because, for me, horror games need to be story-driven. And as much as Fnaf has a story behind it, as much as Amnesia, what was the other game I was named? Oh, Slenderman has a story behind it. It is background. And I love games like that. The original Zombies mode for Call of Duty, the whole story for World at War was in the background. And I loved that. But you have to realize that was like a wave-based, it wasn't even horror, it's just a zombie mode. So you can fire all the guns at things for endless rounds. But for a horror game to really keep me there, the story has to be pretty decently tied in. In fact, for Soma, that was it. You weren't even sure you were in a horror game. Well, you were at first, because the atmosphere was definitely creepy. But, like, you were there for the story originally. You are trying to figure it out. Your character's not going around because he's like, oh, spooky. Like,
yeah, there's a reason he's there.
Like, he's there. He's like, I need to get out of here. I'm lost. Someone help me. You find someone to help you. Like, Soma's very interesting like that. And the story kept me going, and I kept having to push myself. I literally would have to push myself. I'd say, I don't want to play anymore. I want to stop. I'm like, no, Tony, you have to go. You told yourself you're going to play. And Soma is a game that everyone should play because it is so perfect in atmosphere building, so perfect in scary mechanics, so good in its visual aid, and also its story is really kind of an interesting question that would make it. It talks about existentialism a lot, and that can make, granted, if your mechanics are good, themes of existentialism can be weaved into many genres of games. And the fact that they wanted to handle kind of a complex topic of existentialism in the setting of a horror game is really interesting. And I think people should play Soma because when you get to the end, you're just like, whoa. It's one of those games that after you play, you just kind of like sit for a day or two trying to digest, like that was it. And you just sit there in silence. Like, if you want that experience, Soma.
Oh, that's awesome. Everybody play Soma.
Yep.
Yeah, so Cassie, what about you?
Well, again, like my experience with horror games are pretty limited, but I would, I guess, say white noise as someone who, like, hasn't played a lot of horror games and gets pretty scared by stuff. Like, I'm afraid of the dark, so, like,
A lot of people are.
like, as someone who gets pretty scared pretty easily, I would say white noise is a good, like, beginner kind of horror game because you can play with other people. Like, the enemy could be, like, one of your friends, so it gives you, like, a more, like, relaxed environment. And like, if you're not playing against, well, even if you are playing against a bot, you know that you can kind of control the situation a little bit more, and it's fairly easy to get away from the monster as well. And it's cool. There's a bunch of different environments, a bunch of different maps, and it's just, I really like how it's multiplayer because you can share that scary experience with your friends, and that makes it just a little bit less scary.
Yeah, that's great. It's kind of like Dead by Daylight, if anybody knows what that game is. It's kind of like that. But yeah, and that's a great point, Cassie, is that it's multiplayer, so that, you know, you can play as a monster or you can just play as a group of investigators against an AI. I know that's what me and Cassie do a lot. And that's why I want to play Phasmophobia at some point. Once I get like a PC, I want to try and play Phasmophobia because that seems like a really fun game. And you know, you can do it with your friends. It sounds super fun. Kind of be like on a paranormal investigation team and kind of.
Yeah, Phasmophobia is really interesting.
Yeah. So once I get a PC, I need to play with you and Steven.
I was going to say Minecraft too because it could be scary. But that's not a horror game.
A horror
you could make it a horror game. The Nether's pretty scary.
Yeah. The mansion's pretty scary. The woodland mansions.
That's true. But it's more, I guess, scary in the sense that you don't know what's coming at you, but you more than likely can handle it.
Yeah. I'm not even going to get into Minecraft too much because I could dedicate an entire podcast episode and a half to Minecraft. That's so fun. I guess for me, I mean, I love horror games and horror movies and stuff like that. Although I do get very scared. But I like the adrenaline rush of it. It's kind of
You also feel accomplished.
Yeah,
especially after moments of danger. You're like, I mean, I don't know about for movies, but once you're like in a game and you get through a scary part, especially after the adrenaline rush, and you're like, ha, I did it.
I don't know if I can use this example because as a game I haven't played, but I've seen a full playthrough of it, so I think I would be able to use.
Are you
gonna
say Until Dawn?
No. Ooh, Until Dawn's really good though, because I'm trying to figure out a game that someone who's looking for a good horror game experience without having to have too much video game experience. So like people like something that is maybe more story driven and that you can kind of just walk through an experience rather than like have to like worry super hard about like surviving. Until Dawn is awesome, and it's a story driven game based on your choices and the butterfly effect, and that's awesome. I love that. I can't remember who made it. What was it?
I don't remember. It was not Telltale.
No, and it was also for the PS4, right?
Yes, it was exclusive to the PS4. They just released it recently is a really relative term, but recently for the PC.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Which was very unfortunate because I definitely wanted to experience it, but I was not interested in getting a PlayStation 4.
The game I would say everyone should play if they're looking for a really terrifying horror game experience is Layers of Fear.
I've heard of that game.
And I know, Cassie, you know what Layers of Fear is? You said you've heard of it. It's about a painter, or an artist, I think a painter, who was not a very good person. I'm going to try not to spoil too much. He made some bad life decisions, and, you go through, this house, basically, but it's very, like, it can get very surreal sometimes. They're very creative scares, very terrifying. It gets very intense sometimes with just the amount of scares they're throwing at you when you walk through, and it's all connected to the backstory of this guy's work and the events that took place and how his wife became this how she's portrayed as this monster. It's very, very terrifying, and it uses sound very well. It uses visuals very well, and it's something you can kind of just walk through and experience. Learn the story as you go through. You can read. Every time you get accosted by the threat, it's scripted, and it leads to the next part of the story where you wake up and you're somewhere else. So this is good for you people who aren't huge video gamers, but also you're looking for a good horror experience. I definitely recommend Layers of Fear. And there's also a second Layers of Fear now too that I've also seen a playthrough of. I personally like the first one better, but they're both great. It's creating that sense of dread. And I've had this happen to me several times, especially when I'm new to a game. A horror game, a horror game has done its job very well to scare you when you don't want to move forward.
Yes.
When you don't want to move forward. You are so scared, you do not want to take another step.
Soma does that several times, and in a very impressive way that doesn't feel like you just cheesed it. It doesn't happen always. Not every step is like this, but sometimes there's steps where you're like, I don't want to go forward. But if I don't go forward, I'm just going to be stuck in here and die someday. Yeah. Lore-wise. And that, and intellectually, I can't move the story forward. But you want to move the story forward. That's a big thing that I think drives Soma, is that they had to make the game something you want to participate in, because that's what drives you forward. You want to see the story unfold. You want to see the story unfold. And the problem is sometimes there is such a monumental either risk or perceived risk or danger or perceived danger, just like anything. And you're like, the game doesn't always let you know when danger's happening. That's good. Sometimes it does. There were a few times where it literally is like, I wonder what that is. We're definitely hinting at danger. They're not even being inconspicuous about it. They're like, no, that's that noise or that visual audio cue, whatever you want. Whatever that cue is we just gave you that something terrible is ahead, we're not screwing with you on this one. And we played it differently so we're not screwing with you. That is danger. Right up ahead. Anyway, do you want to hear more about the story? Well, you got to go forward. You have to go towards that. You have to go towards that right now. You can just wait there and we'll just all sit here. Yeah, exactly. Or you can find out more about the story. And then find a phrase, like you were saying, it's different because it's not built in necessarily. I mean, it is, but it's in the background. And that's what I enjoy, though. I enjoy delving into what scares you most, digging deep to find out the truth. And then, like Soma and Layers of Fear, it tells the story very clearly as you go through.
And some things you just figure out on your own, of course. And I know Cassie's also seen Layers of Fear. What are your thoughts on Layers of Fear, Cassie? Give me like your analysis.
It's really cool. I actually liked Layers of Fear 2 better, just because I liked the ship atmosphere more, because I thought I don't know, it felt spooky. And then if I recall correctly, there were also some times where you could die in the game because of like chase scenes.
Yeah.
But I like both games. I think they're really cool. It was really fun to watch Storpy play that. And I'd love to watch you play that someday.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Is that like Layers of Fear sticks in my memory a lot because it was a really good horror game, but I'm trying to give it a lot of time to the point where I've forgotten almost everything that's happened in the game, so I can replay it in the future for YouTube. But that first experience in some cases is all you need. You can tell stories about it. Thank you for listening to this episode of ControllerCast. Let me know on the Twitter page or the discussion page or in the comments section. What is your favorite horror game? And also answer our question today. What horror games have you played that you recommend to anyone? Doesn't matter like how weird, what the stigma is with it, like what you're like playing, like the Resident Evil games, Amnesia, Five Nights at Freddy's, some more traditional styles, and maybe even point and click horror games, SCP, whatever. Give me your feedback. What are your favorites and what are your recommendations?
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you guys doing this with me, and it's always a pleasure having you guys on. Well, thank you for listening or watching this episode of ControllerCast, where we went over the horror game genre and how it creates suspense, atmosphere, and all the different aspects that go into it to create a horror game and that experience that a lot of us hold dear and are very memorable. And we will see you guys on the next episode. See ya.